Well, good morning. Tuesday morning. We're looking into this week at bearing burdens. We saw last week at Galatians 6:1, restoring the fallen. And I believe right on the tail end of that, and as part of it, looking at Galatians 6:2. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. And we talked about that. How do we help the fallen? How do we help someone else? Each one of us has burdens. Each one of us has a thing in our lives that we just find heavy to bear, heavy to have a part of our lives. And for some, it's the stress of family, stress of job, financial. Some it's personal, even for example, depression, and so on and so forth. And so we all have burdens that are hard and heavy to bear. Paul again writing, if a man be overtaken in a fall. So there are things that can lead us to sin and so on. And Hebrew writer of Hebrews talks about the weight that does so easily beset us. So in Galatians 6 and verse number 2, I want to look at that, bear ye. And just for a moment to take a glance at that, the word bear means to support, to sustain, to bear a burden or a weight. For example, there would be beasts of burden. For example, donkeys, horses, camels, mules, and so on. There are different animals that bear the weight of, that would carry heavier loads than a person could. And so, of course, before vehicles and all that stuff came along, now we have, of course, machinery that can bear all kinds of burdens and weights that are available as we find. But to bear would be to carry, to convey, to support, to remove from one place, or to remove from place to place. So as we find somebody to come along and help with that. So as we look at this aspect, it is much easier to criticize. It's much easier to push someone down. It's much easier to kick someone while they're down, especially when they've done something wrong, especially when we think of going through things that part of their lives that we would never imagine that they would, and and could never see them going down that road. And as we look at sin or faults, some are more a greater degree than others. But as we look at that, what we need, and we find with Christ, for example, in the book of John, the woman at the well. I mean, he didn't, give her grief because of the lifestyle she lived, didn't berate her and so on. He offered to her what she needed, living water. Um, Zacchaeus, I get those two guys. Zacchaeus didn't go on his case about how much he stole. He went to his house and had dinner, had a meal with him, which was the custom of the day to do so, inviting someone in. And it wouldn't have been a 20-minute thing, it would have been a few hours. But we find at the end of that, the outcome of that was that Zacchaeus went and restored fourfold what he had taken. That's quite a sum to pay back. And so we find as the Lord dealt with the people who and spent time with them, that according to the religious rulers of the day were the outcasts, the people not to spend time with because they were lower than themselves. We find that Jesus doesn't go along and just point out everybody's sin. He could have. He was God in the flesh. He knew he could have known everything about, or sorry, pointed out everything about everybody because he knows everything about all of us. But he didn't do that. So it's a lot easier to do that. It is easier to kick someone all the way down, to gossip about someone, because, oh, they did this horrible thing. But to come alongside and to help bear. We're not talking about excuse, and we're not talking about trying to make it go away. But as we find someone who is being restored, to help bear with that burden, to come alongside, to pray with them, to love them, to weep with them, to rejoice with them, to show true care and compassion, to bear up. That restoration process is a heavy thing. The shame, the guilt, and all that stuff associated with that fault. Being restored is a heavy thing. To come alongside and bear that up, to help lift the weight, support the weight. And there we show compassion, I believe, that the Lord wants us to show. So as we look at the fact of bearing burdens, it helps with the weight when there's two people carrying than when there's one. We'll look some more this week. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you tomorrow.